Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to the Netherlands once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from my recent trip down there. So we're going to go to another brewery that has never featured on the channel before. These guys are a very new addition to the Dutch beer scene from what I gather, and they're still a very small operation. But this brewery came as a recommendation to me by the guys at the Bierwinkel in Leiden, which is about halfway between Amsterdam to the north and Den Haag to the south. A beautiful little city, home to the Netherlands' oldest university as well as the oldest astronomy school in the world. I very nearly ended up there in 2015 before I settled on Sweden, but that's another story. But the Bierwinkel is an awesome little beer shop, a huge selection of Dutch beers as well as things from across the European continent and further afield, and a crazy selection of Belgian stuff as well. Lots of different vintages, lots of different breweries who are both very well known and not so well known, so definitely worth checking these guys out. I would highly recommend it, and I'll put the link to their social media in the video description below. But for this review, we are going to go to a brewery that are very local to them. So we're going a couple of kilometres to the south of Leiden to Voorschotens, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Fingers crossed, otherwise I'm going to give the Dutch beer tubers a laugh. But yeah, we're going to go to Voorschotens, and we're having a look at my first beer from Brouwerij Voorschoten. And this is one of my favourite styles of Belgian traditional beer. So this one is the Voorschotens Quadrupel. It comes in at 11% ABV, and I think you know what style this one is, a Belgian style quadrupel beer. But yeah, very, very curious to see how this one turns out. I went into the Bierwinkel and told them, you know, I like malty kind of beers like Scotch ales, quadrupels, doppelbocks and things like this, and this is one of the things that was recommended to me, especially since it was quite local to Leiden. So yeah, very, very curious to see how this one turns out. Fingers crossed it's another good beer, but I'm pretty confident about it. One, because the Bierwinkel have not led me astray yet, and two, the quality of the Dutch beer scene is very, very high these days. So yeah, curious to see how this one turns out. Since this is a Dutch beer review, of course, a massive shout out to the guys in the Dutch Beer Collective. We have the OG, Remy Den Dupe at Beer Geek Holland. He has reviewed their blonde beer, in fact, so you can check out his review of that. We've also got Herben Caspers at Dutch Beer Geek. He lives very close to Leiden, in fact. We've got Thomas Hoendam at Thomas Opent, who's a very good friend of mine, of course. Love that guy. And then we've also got Douglas Hesselmans, who's only just started his channel quite recently, in fact, Beers with Douglas. But what I'll do is I'll put the link to the Dutch Beer Collective Instagram and Facebook pages in the description below, and you can check those out, and that way you'll get the links to all four of their channels. But do go and show them some love. Lovely guys, and they really know what they're talking about when it comes to their beers. So yeah, you'll quite often see them on my live streams and stuff like this, and I've featured on their channels a few times as well. But yeah, definitely go and check those guys out. But yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then, and I'm very curious to see what it has in store for us. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Brouwerij Voorschoten. The very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Dutch beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to quite regularly at the moment, and I'm sure we'll continue to add to that regularly in the future because the Dutch guys have offered to keep me supplied with Dutch beers, which I'm really looking forward to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brouwerij Voorschoten, then on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, Brouwerij Voorschoten are based in Voorschotens, which is just to the south of Leiden, about halfway between Amsterdam to the north and Den Haag to the south, which is in the province of Zuid-Holland in the Netherlands. But the brewery was founded by Sander Roejakers, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Dutch is a crazy language in terms of its pronunciation, but yeah, Sander Roejakers, who had a very diverse background before getting into brewing his own beer. He worked for Leiden University and for Post NL as well. He's worked in various management positions as far as I could figure out, but he'd been a home brewer for a number of years, and he received a lot of positive feedback on his beers. But apparently when he moved to Voorschotens in 2018, he was amazed to find that the town didn't have a brewery already. There's about 700 breweries or so in the Netherlands, as far as I can gather just now, which for a country of 17 million people, if I remember rightly, is pretty damn impressive. But he went on to release his first beer, which was a Tripel. That was released in December of 2018, and then they added more beers over the following year. There was the Blonde, and I forget what the next one after that was, and I think the Quadrupel came out quite a bit after that. This was the 4th edition to their core range, but they've done a few other beers as well. I think there was like a coffee porter and maybe a pale ale or something like that. So yeah, they have been releasing a few different beers, but as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced 6 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they seem to focus mainly on the Belgian styles of beer. So yeah, it's all Belgian stuff in their core range. I think there's a Blonde in there, there's the Tripel, the Quadrupel, and I forget what the 4th one is. But yeah, this one, as far as I can gather, as of March 2021, was the latest addition to their core range. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brouwerij Voorschoten for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. There seems to be a very good website down in the Netherlands called beernet.nl, and that's where I get most of my information on the Dutch breweries, if it doesn't come from the guys in the Dutch Beer Collective, of course. So yeah, I would also recommend that you check that out. I love that how in Europe these days there seems to be like a dedicated beer news website in each country. So yeah, there's Hopfenhelden in Germany, there's beernews.sa up here in Sweden, and then of course you've got Beernet NL as well, which is pretty cool. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can tell you about Brouwerij Voorschoten for the moment. Check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. And fingers crossed we can review some more from these guys in the future. I would like to have a go at their Tripel actually, so I'll see about getting that the next time I go down to the Netherlands. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a look at this beer itself. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty nice. It's pretty straightforward actually, and I think it does the job. It really does the job actually. I like the V for victory, V for Voorschoten as well actually. But yeah, you can see the happy beer there. I'm guessing this one's meant to be the Tripel with the crown on it, but you can see nice plain black bottle cap on this one. No back label to it of course, but yeah, 11% ABV this one. Does it have English on there? No, it's just got Dutch and on there on the side as well. But yeah, I think it's just looking at what it says, it's just saying, oh, it's like an aromatic beer and stuff. So yeah, just let you have a little look at the Dutch there for those of you who are Dutch speakers. But yeah, Belgian style Quadrupel, this one, 11% ABV. I'm not sure what I would have paid for this, maybe about €5 or €6, let's say 6. So yeah, about £5.25, £5.50 sterling, maybe about $7, $7.50 American, something like that. So yeah, the Netherlands is a wee bit more expensive, but not. You're probably paying a little bit less than Danish prices there. Sweden, of course, is quite cheap for beer because we've got Systembolaget, and that's run not for profit. But you know, when you're buying from private beer shops like this, as I would be when I go over to Copenhagen, it is a little touch more expensive. But you know, €6 for a Dutch brewed Tripel and Quadrupel rather, is not so bad. But yeah, let's have a little look at this one then and see how we get on. Very curious to have a go at this beer. 330ml bottle, of course, and let's have a go at it. I love, when it comes to Belgian style beer, I love my Quadrupels, I love my Tripels, and I love the Blondes as well. But yeah, Flanders Reds are another one. I really enjoy those. So maybe the next time I go down, these guys might have a bit of a Flanders Red or something like this. Who knows? Oh, don't know how I managed to do that there. But yeah, there we go. It's a pretty dark looking quad actually, but yeah, see, just line up the bottle again so that my OCD is happy, and there we go. So yeah, I did get a little bit on the bottom of the glass, which I'll wipe off in a minute, but yeah, this is actually quite a dark Quadrupel actually. But before the head disappears, you can see that it poured with about between a quarter and a third finger of a frothy, I would say light beige, kind of fawny coloured head there. That is fading away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer, but there is a nice kind of ring around the edge of the glass there, which is quite interesting. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it does look very, very nice. If I shine the light through this beer, it's got a lovely, very dark, kind of burgundy what's the other word? Burgundy maroon sort of colour. This one, it's like a very, very dark sort of rosewood colour that you're getting out of this beer. But if you just put it in front of the camera straight like that, it actually appears as if it's more kind of ebony in colour. But yeah, it's got a lovely, very, very dark ruby, ruby rosewoody kind of colour to it. Actually looks very, very nice. It's actually quite clear as well. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up on the camera, but this is definitely not one of the hazier quadrupels that I've come across in recent times. So yeah, lovely kind of colour of it. If you just look, the way to kind of see that, I'm not sure if it will show up on the camera, but if you just look under the head, you can sort of see the clarity of this beer just underneath the head there. So yeah, it looks very, very nice. But remember, when it comes to the colour of these beers, it's dependent on 1, the type of malts that you use, and 2, the length of your wort boil. And of course you've got adjuncts that can affect it as well, but essentially the longer you boil your wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour out of the beer. I'm actually not sure how long a wort boil is for a quadrupel, but one of the tricks that they always use with quadrupels to keep the mouthfeel down a little bit is to add, like, you know, candy sugar and things into them. So that's the same with tripels. So that's a common technique in Belgian brewing that they use to put the alcohol levels up. They put sort of different types of sugar in these beers, and that's where you get a lot of these kind of phenolic, medicinal type flavours and things out of the Belgian beers. It's a lot of it's due to like rock candy sugar and you know, kind of stuff like this, but you know, it works out very, very well. So yeah, in terms of a quadrupel, it certainly looks the part. Nothing overly surprising about the appearance. So let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. I have to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah. Ooh, that does smell really nice actually. It smells very authentic as well. I mean, I say this about German lagers and things like this as well. When we're trying Helles, Dunkel, Doppelbock and stuff like that, what you look for from these beers is that they're authentic and they match the style closely. And you can tell with this one straight away that it's going to be like that. I look for that when it comes to the Belgian blondes, the tripels and the quadrupels as well. I don't drink all that many dubels, in fairness. I prefer the tripels, quads and the blondes over the dubels, to be honest. But yeah, you can tell straight away with this beer it's pretty damn authentic, and I think it's going to work out really nicely, in fact. So yeah, of course the classic sort of examples of this one would be, of course, in the Netherlands you've got the little Trap quadrupel. Down in Belgium you've got the Rochefort. You've got, who else has a quadrupel? I'm trying to remember. You know, you've got the Westvleteren 12, of course, is the other one, and you've got the Saint Bernardus quadrupel. So yeah, those are probably the classic examples of the quadrupel style. But this one goes together very, very nicely. It smells very good, very, very authentic, and that's exactly what we want. So yeah, where do we start with this one then? So of course, when it comes to these Belgian style beers, it's more to do with the yeast and things like that. The Belgian style of brewing is very, very yeast forward. I need to stop saying Belgian so much because it is Dutch beer that we're talking about here. But anyway, so you've got that lovely big kind of doughy, yeasty quality coming out of this beer. This one, in fairness though, for a quadrupel, it actually comes across as one of the more malty ones that I've come across in recent times. It doesn't smell quite as thick in the aroma as some of the other ones that I remember. But yeah, you can definitely smell that nice kind of brown bready, doughy, yeasty sort of thing underneath. There's a lot of brown sugar in there, sweet caramel, a lot of lovely kind of biscuity notes as well, a little touch of a grainy kind of quality too. But yeah, it goes together really nicely. Absolutely. So yeah, doughy, bready base. You can smell a little bit of that sort of wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing on top of that. Big, thick, doughy notes in there, of course, as well, just sitting on top of it. There's one or two kind of woody elements to the aroma, as well as a little bit of nuttiness, which I really like. So yeah, the malty makeup in this beer, again, like I say, it's very, very authentic, but it's just so nicely done. So yeah, brown sort of wholemeal bready base to it. Then you get a bit of that thicker, doughy, yeasty kind of thing sitting on top. You can smell a little bit of a kind of woody quality mixed in with that, a little bit of nuttiness in there as well. And then the further you go into the nose, that's when you start to get the brown sugars in there. So straight up sweet caramel, good little bit of a kind of toastier caramel as well as a little bit of a biscuity quality. So yeah, the aromas that you're getting out of this thing are just crazy, to be honest with you. I really like how all of this goes about its business. The aroma in this beer is, from the malty and yeasty perspective, I think is very, very nice. The more that I smell of it, the more that the woodiness and the kind of nuttiness comes out of it. But these are all elements that you would expect of these kind of beers. But yeah, you do definitely get a little bit of a kind of phenolic-y, fruity kind of thing out of it, and it does get a little touch cakey the more you go into the aroma as well, but we'll come to that in a minute. On the hoppy side of things, it's what you would expect as well. You've got a little touch of earthiness there at the back of the nose. There's a bit of a herbal quality in there, and also wee elements of floral notes and a bit of grassiness too. With these quadrupels, from what I understand, they tend to use lower alpha acid hops. You know, some of them I know use a little bit of Czech Sats, some of them use a little bit of Slovenian Styrian Goldings, some of them of course will be using Belgian hops that are roughly about the same. It's low alpha acid hops, you know, 6% that they'll use for these. The Hallertau and Tettnangers from Germany are also candidates for this kind of thing. But the Belgians, of course, do produce their own varieties of hops as well. So maybe they're using, in this one, since it's a Dutch beer, I'm not sure exactly what they'll use. So yeah, they've got, because in the Netherlands they've got access to a whole host of different things, of course. But yeah, the hoppy side of things, it does have a wee bit of an almost American element to it, because the floral notes are quite bright, to be honest with you, and the grassiness just has a little bit of zesty character to it. I mean, could they be using a little bit of like Northern Brewer from Germany, or maybe a little bit of Bramling's Cross from England? I'd be more inclined to say that it was Northern Brewer from Germany, because it's got that bright floral character that you expect of the German hops. You know, there's a few other candidates it could be. It could be a little bit of Eureka from America, or something like that. So yeah, I'd be curious to know exactly what hops it is they've used in this one. It could of course just be something simple like I mentioned before, and it's just the way it interacts with the yeast or whatever. But yeah, on the fruity side of things though, it is exactly what you'd expect. For me, this one's got a lovely bit of raisin to it. It's got quite a little bit of raisiny sharpness. There's some juicy plum underneath, but the fruits actually really lean more towards a kind of blackcurranty, blackberry sort of thing. I get quite a lot of blackberry out of this beer, to be honest with you. But like I said, there's a little touch of cakiness to this one, and you can pick up a little bit of that slightly phenolic, medicinal kind of thing with the aroma of this beer too. But it smells absolutely lovely. As I said, not the thickest of quadrupels that I've come across in the aroma from memory, but I think it's going to be a pretty nice beer actually. So yeah, take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma. The quadrupels give you, you know, a hell of a complexity once they open up a little bit, and this one has certainly delivered on that as well. But let's have a taste of this one and see how we get on. So this one is the Voorschotens Quadrupel, coming in at 11% ABV from Brouwerij Voorschoten, just a little bit to the south of Leiden in Zuid-Holland down in the Netherlands. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanje, Skål, Proost. Oh yeah, that is really nicely done. First thing that comes into my head about this is just how smooth it is. This is definitely one of the more kind of slick and oily kind of quadrupels that I can remember coming across. It's got a wee bit of dryness on the back end as well, come to think of it. It's got a bit of toastiness in there, which I can appreciate as well. So yeah, the flavour profile of this one I think is really quite nice. So yeah, first impression, as I say, the mouthfeel is quite nice with this, but it has got a wee bit of a dryness to it as well. The sugars in this one are are highly caramelised actually, but there's a real slickness about this beer. This takes a really different approach to the tripel, the quadrupel. Why do I keep doing that? It takes a really different approach to the quadrupel compared to what I've experienced before. But the main question, of course, is it a nice beer? Yeah, it is, definitely. So yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this one then and see how we go. So straight away with this beer then, I'm going to say that you get a nice, it has a really woody backbone to it. You can feel the woodiness just going right across the middle third of your palate there. That forms the backbone of this beer. On top of that though, well, maybe as you progress further into the aftertaste, you can feel the woodiness does sort of dry out a little bit, but on top of that you get a nice smooth kind of brown bready quality to the beer, and you can feel that in the centre of your palate that just kind of thickens up a bit. You do get a little bit of that doughy, bready, yeasty sort of thing, but this is definitely not the kind of yeastiest. Is that the right way? Most yeastiest, who knows? But yeah, this is definitely not the most yeasty of quadrupels that you're going to come across. This one really is a more malty leaning quadrupel, come to think of it, but I like it. I certainly do, and it's quite different as well. So the brown sugars are what really distinguish this one, but we'll come to those in a minute. So if you go to the very centre of your palate and then move forward, you will notice there is a wee touch of nuttiness develops in that base layer of the beer, the woody side of things. But like I say, on top of that you've got that smooth sort of wholemealy brown bready layer, and then towards the back half of that middle third of your tongue, that's where the doughy yeasty notes really kind of push their way out. But in the very centre of your palate, this is where you've got the brown sugars. The brown sugars incidentally come across as really highly caramelised. That makes me wonder if this beer's had like a really long boil, although in fairness it doesn't, you know, my first impression of this one from the mouthfeel is long boil, good little bit of candy sugar added into it, because the mouthfeel of this one isn't overly slick. Like I said, this is definitely it's not overly thick, it is more of a slick mouthfeel you get out of this one. Slurring my words in this review, that's terrible. But yeah, it's not, the brown sugars in the middle of your palate, you can feel that very, very dark, highly caramelised treacle sort of thing to this one. It's got a bit of bitterness to it as well, to be honest with you. That brown sugary note does have a real bit of bitterness to it, but in the very centre of your palate it does have a little bit of a sweeter edge as well, and it's almost very layered. So the bottom layer of the brown sugars is very highly caramelised, slightly thick and almost slightly bitter. On top of that you start to get a little bit of a kind of sweeter caramel out of it, and then you've got a few kind of biscuity elements on the top, and they just sort of spread over the side a little bit. So yeah, it's a very brown sugary leaning quadrupel, this one actually, but definitely not the breadiest and yeastiest of ones that I've come across. But it's interesting. I mean, it shows you another kind of perspective on this particular style, if you like. But yeah, I can really appreciate how that kind of goes together in this one. It's the one that kind of grows on you a little bit. So yeah, this is definitely worth trying if you can come across it. But I think we've covered the middle of the palate fairly extensively so far. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a slight cakiness in there. The breadiness just sort of thickens up a wee bit, but you do get a little bit of bitterness there as well, like a well-fired bread crusty kind of note. But on the back third of your palate, you can feel there is a real graininess to this beer. It's on that back third of the palate, the graininess just intensifies, and then on top of it, you get a little bit of a lighter, you get a little bit of that kind of more light, kind of yeasty type quality coming out of the beer. So yeah, you can feel that sort of slightly puffy, yeasty sort of thing on the back third of your palate, and the thickness just drops as you move further forward. The thickness drops a little bit. Then as you reach that, that middle, that border between the middle third of your palate, the thickness drops away quite dramatically. Then you've got that kind of more dense layer in the middle third of your palate. So yeah, it's really interesting how this one kind of goes together. Actually, this is definitely, it's got a good toasty element to it, and sort of a little bit of bitterness to it. So one of the more bitter quadruples as well that I've come across in the malty yeasty side of things. But on the hoppy side of the beer, it is what you'd expect. Back corners of the palate, there's definitely a little touch of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it does develop a little bit of a herbal quality, but then the floral aromatic notes come out as you reach the kind of front corners, of your tongue. So I like how that, I do like how that goes, how that side of the beer goes about its business. But round the front curve of the palate, it's got a little bit of grassiness there. It's not really zesty, but it's got a nice wee bit of a, it has got a nice little bit of, how would you say, it just has a nice little bit of a kind of freshness to it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, I think that covers the green component of the beer, kind of as you'd expect. Like I said, I would be curious to know what hop they're using in this one. Something tells me Northern Brewer, but I wouldn't be 100% sure about that. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of the beer then. Again, on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you can feel there is a little touch of cakiness develops out of the beer, like a sort of, you know, brandy fruit cake or something like that. There is a little bit of that comes out of the beer, and it does have a wee bit of a kind of well-fired bread crusty bitterness there. But the base layer of that front third of your tongue, there's a nice, there is a nice little bit of, how would you say, you can feel a bit of the woodiness forming the backbone of the beer. There is a little bit of the breadiness as well, a bit of the sort of grainy brown bready sort of qualities, and then on top of that, that's when you get those nice fruity esters that just roll their way out of the hops from the beer. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you can get a little bit of that kind of phenolic quality mixed in with the cakey elements, but then you start to get a little bit of the raisiny sharpness there. There is a wee bit of a more oily plum, but as you move further forward, I think you get a bit more of a kind of figgy element to the beer. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I've said is right there. You've got a little bit of that phenolic-y, medicinal, cough syrupy sort of thing at the very, very back of that front third of your palate. Then you get a little bit of a sharper raisin, a more juicy plum, and then as you move further forward, it's got a really kind of figgy, a lighter sort of figgy quality. But as you reach the front half of that front third of your palate, you get a sort of blackcurranty underlayer to it, but then you get the more oily and slightly sharper blackberries sitting on top of that. So yeah, it's kind of, this beer has everything you'd expect from the Quadrupel style, but like I say, the things that distinguish it are it's got a more slick mouthfeel to it. The malty side of things is a little bit more bitter. The brown sugars almost have a little bit of bitterness to them, which is kind of interesting. They're really well fired, but also very highly caramelized. And yeah, it's not the breadiest and yeastiest of Quadrupels that you're going to come across. But is it a nice example of the style? Yeah, I think so. And it kind of shows you another aspect of what a Quadrupel can actually be. So I think that summarises the flavour of this one quite nicely. But in terms of the mouthfeel then, I would say that this beer is kind of mid-bodied to the top end, like straight in the middle of mid-bodied to top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a really nice slickness to it as well, like I said. In terms of hoppy bitterness, you're not going to get a lot of bitterness out of this beer, you know, 15 IBUs or something like that. There's not a lot of bitterness to this one. But malty base, as I say, is quite smooth. There's a nice little bit of yeastiness to this one. This beer, it's got a bit of sweetness. I mean, I think the sweetness does build a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste, but there is a bit of a toasty, well-fired kind of thing to this one, and it's got a nice, juicy, fruity character to it. It's got a little bit of sharpness, but the fruits really lean towards that more light and juicy side of things. So yeah, I can appreciate how that side of the beer goes together as well. But overall, it gets a big thumbs up from me. Nice to introduce this brewery to you here on the channel, especially at such an early stage in their history. So yeah, I think that is a nice summary, if you like, or a longer summary I should say, of the Voorschotens Quadrupel from Brouwerij Voorschoten. So yeah, we can leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brouwerij Voorschoten as well. If you're watching from the Netherlands, do give me some other examples of Quadrupels that I should take a look at. Some tripels as well would be very interesting. And yeah, I think hopefully we can return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. Make sure you check out my friends in the Dutch Beer Collective as well. I'll put the links, as I said, in the description below. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media. Make sure you check out Brouwerij Voorschoten, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and prost.